does it matter if money is not completely clean, and can it ever be totally clean? So, first question, something you and I are both interested in, and that is the chaos around book festivals at the moment and the sponsorship from Baillie Gifford. So, Beth has said, please can you talk about Baillie Gifford and the Edinburgh International Book Festival? It seems to me that although climate activists think they're being progressive, it's really the book festival who will struggle to fund themselves going forward. What are your thoughts? I think it's worth, first of all, because there's been a lot that's happened since Beth sent in this message as well in terms of their sponsorship of the Cheltenham Book Festival and basically all of them. But Robert, do you just want to explain the background for people and what's been going on here and who Baillie Gifford are, etc.?
So Baillie Gifford are a very big fund manager. They manage hundreds of billions of pounds of other people's money. And some of the money they manage will be for people who don't think of themselves as particularly wealthy because, they'll manage people's pension fund money, for example. They're pretty successful. But the thing that has actually weirdly been a bit different about them from many other financial firms, particularly in this country, is for years they have sponsored all sorts of literary and artistic events. So extraordinary numbers of book festivals depend on their sponsorship to do all sorts of things that most people would regard as good. So, for example, at the Borders Festival, where I know the people who run that quite well, the money that Baillie Gifford provides free events for school kids, free books for school kids. If you're talking to people at Cheltenham, the Baillie Gifford money helps to keep prices down for everybody. And those people who go to book festivals, pretty much all the big ones, Cheltenham, Edinburgh, they're the big three, have had a relationship with Baillie Gifford for years. And all of them have now announced that they are either suspending that relationship or ending that relationship. Glastonbury, too, had a relationship with Baillie Gifford, which has been suspended.
And this has come about, hasn't it? Because of they've been targeted by the activist group Fossil Free Books, and to do with, as you say, their investments in fossil fuels and companies that have commercial dealings with Israel. So this has been a very targeted campaign by Fossil Free Books.
It has. And I think it's worth just going through the history of this. Fossil Free Books have been trying to persuade authors and people in the books industry to criticize book festivals that take money for Baillie Gifford for some considerable time, months and months and months and months. What suddenly turned a climate protest into something that became, really difficult for the festivals is the way that Fossil Free Books then linked Baillie Gifford to support for Israel and alleged that in some way Baillie Gifford was financing the terrible events that we've seen in Gaza, and was somehow providing financial support to an Israel that has conducted military actions in Gaza that have led to the deaths of more than 35,000 people. And at that point, a number of authors said, well, the 800 authors and people working in the books industry, including pretty famous people like Sally Rooney, signed a letter, urging book festivals to withdraw from taking money from Baillie Gifford. It got really very problematic for the book festivals. One, because certain authors said they wouldn't appear if these festivals continued to take money, and secondly, because talking, for example, to people I know at Hay, they say that the individual people working for Hay felt under very significant personal pressure. I was told that their email accounts, they say, were being hacked, that their website was being targeted. Now, we don't know whether this is connected to fossil-free books at all, but people at Hay were getting very upset and feeling vulnerable.
Yeah, you can understand why people would then pull out of it. Like, authors wouldn't want their books associated with this. Nobody would want to be associated, of course, with any of this. But there's a question over how bad what Baillie Gifford are doing is, because what we're talking about is money invested in companies. And, I think it's something like 2% of Baillie Gifford's investments are in fossil fuel companies, which is below the average, isn't it, in terms of investment firms in fossil fuels? It's more like 11%. And then when you look at this this claim that by these activist groups that Baillie Gifford has got nearly £10 billion worth invested in companies with direct links to Israel's defence and technology companies, what we're talking about there is companies like Amazon and Meta and things, isn't it? It's not. There's a blurry line, because these guys are using social media to then promote their activism, but yet kicking off at Baillie Gifford for investing in those companies.
So I find all of this, both odd and in some ways pretty upsetting, truthfully. And I hold no candle for Baillie Gifford. Let's be absolutely clear. I've been in many Baillie Gifford tents over the years promoting. I've written 7 books. I've been going to book festivals since about 2004, and I've been in many Baillie Gifford tents. And actually, in the past, I used to think, oh God, I'm in a Baillie Gifford tent because they think I'm the money person. So they'll put me in a tent sponsored by a fund manager. And I used to sort of think this is all a bit naff, but. Separate from all of that, and I have to say, Baillie Gifford has in a way been quite transparent. Okay, they have published details about a trio of investments, rather smaller investments, that they have in 3 companies that have in the past done business in the occupied territories. Right now, there are many of us, and I say this as a Jew who has supported Israel my entire life. I do believe that the settler movement, the way that Israel is turning a blind eye to settlers who are expropriating Palestinian property in the occupied territories, is wrong. It's just straightforwardly wrong. And, my own view is that as and when, and let's hope we get there at some point, we get to some stability between Israel and Palestine, and we get a 2-state solution, that will have to involve Israel withdrawing from the occupied territories. Right now, Baillie Gifford has conceded that it has investments in Airbnb, a cement company called Cemex, and Bookings Holdings. Those 3 companies have done business in the occupied territories. And Baillie Gifford is transparent about this, and they have said that they are reviewing whether or not, in the end, it is appropriate for them to have those investments. These are tiny, and Baillie Gifford has been very transparent about all of this. Weirdly, and I don't really understand this, if you look at what fossil fuel books have been concentrating on, if they concentrated on maybe Baillie Gifford should divest those investments unless and until, all of those 3 companies have said they're also reviewing what they're doing within the occupied territories, by the way. And so we don't, Cemex have said that they don't any longer do anything within the occupied territories, and Bookings, Holdings, and Airbnb are looking at it. And that's, that is a good thing. But in general, the thing that worries me is this, okay? You've been to book festivals. One of the amazing things about book festivals is if you're interested in debate, they are a rare place where there is really civilized conversation about really complex issues. People who go to book festivals, let's be clear, are typically people who really care about climate change, for example. What this campaign is doing is actually making it harder for book festivals that encourage debate about the issues that fossil fuel books would like to see debated. It makes it harder for these book festivals to survive. And I just don't, it seems to me that this is a case of cutting off your nose to spite your face.
So the point is, though, with all of this, these book festivals cannot now survive, can they, without this sponsorship, unless they ramp up prices. And then that's going to make it inaccessible for loads of people. Also, things like, you know, the book festivals I work with, I'm speaking at the Edinburgh Book Festival this year. I do loads of work with local book festivals as well. And as you mentioned, all the kind of charity and outreach work they do, the free books they give for schools. There's one in my area where the money raised from it goes to the local food bank. So that they're much bigger than just being a book festival, which people think loads of middle class people go to, and that's it. But my bigger question on all of this is, you know, for example, my school was sponsored by British American Tobacco. So fundamentally, I genuinely do not think the kids I went to school with and me would have done as well as we have had we not had that sponsorship in the school. So then it's weighing up that element. Is any money ever clean? And if it is, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about companies that fund wars and things, but does it matter if money is not completely clean? And can it ever be totally clean? Because you could be cutting off your nose to spite your face in all of this, couldn't you? Because I genuinely think that sponsorship of my school is what gave us the resources in the school. Our school was so progressive. It was in a really rough area, kids in it from all kinds of backgrounds. And yet we had laptops, we had TV studios in the schools, we were constantly taken into industry all the time, and all of that. That's genuinely why I'm here now, because I had all of that great education, but it was sponsored by a tobacco firm.
So look, my basic view is money doesn't know where it comes from, and if it does good, you know, we should celebrate that. But there are times when businesses that do bad, or individuals that do bad, use certain kinds of sponsorship to launder their reputations, and that is not a good thing. So I do understand. If you just look at the number of people who have died or been in misery in America as a result of the great splurge of opiate addiction, I do understand why lots of galleries and other institutions decided they were no longer going to display the Sackler name. Sackler, the manufacturers and the massive beneficiaries of this opiate manufacturing, because that looked like, you know, reputation laundering in a way that I think any public institution has got to be very careful not to facilitate. But it doesn't feel to me as though Baillie Gifford is remotely in the same category. Yes, it was marketing. It thought as a sort of private fund manager that it wanted to become a bit better known, and it wanted to be associated with activities that most people would regard as, you know, decent, civilized activities, whether it's book festivals. They also, you know, sponsor a book prize. So, you know, being associated with the arts, it felt was sort of good for its reputation. But, you know, in the context of the kind of, you know, capitalist system that, whether people like it or not, is the system we have and pays our wages and pays the bills, Baillie Gifford do not look to me like the most toxic fund manager, not by a million miles. And, you know, the fact that you pointed out that actually their investments in fossil fuels are lower than the industry average. The way that they've responded to this criticism to actually analyse whether or not they have these links with Israel that they've been alleged to have. And as I say, at the moment, you know, my view would be they are, you know, Baillie Gifford is in no way consciously funding Israel's military operations in Gaza. You know, I have an enormous amount of sympathy with the people who are mounting campaigns against global warming and, you know, against, for example, supplying arms to Israel that are currently being used in a way that is doing awful harm to innocent people in Gaza, killing them, injuring them. And so I have enormous sympathy with people who want to campaign on these issues. But where I have a big question where I actually, if I'm honest with you, I think they are probably just straightforwardly wrong, is assuming that depriving book festivals of money from Bailey Gifford is going to do any good in this regard at all. And particularly, if in the process of that, educational resources are not going to, state school kids, which some of the book festivals borders have said they're going to have to cease supplying, those services, for example. That seems to me to be a straightforward harm.
Can I ask you then, because I had this moral dilemma recently there's a charity I work with, which is helping deprived, particularly girls, and it's in my hometown. And one of the things I do with them is organise like trips to different places for them to just see life outside of where they live. So, we come down to Westminster or go to TV studios or whatever. Now, recently, the company, SABIC, the petrochemicals company, that is a big employer in Teesside, offered to pay for this trip, but they're Saudi owned. And this is a charity that predominantly is for young girls. So I talked to the charity bosses about this and I was like, they're going to pay for it all, which means we can make it bigger and better. But they're Saudi owned. And the charity in the end were like, well, we can't on the one hand, teach girls about confidence and how, give them aspiration and all of this, whilst also taking money from a country where women are totally oppressed. And so it was this real thing in my head because I was like, but equally, that business is going to carry on no matter whether we take that money or not for the trip. But it is this real dilemma of what do you do? Like, what would you have done? I mean, in the end, we agreed we wouldn't take the money. But do you think that was right or not?
Yeah, I do think that was right, because I think in this case, this is Saudi washing its reputation because the treatment of women in Saudi is appalling. This seems to me to be a straightforward, case where it's very difficult for your kind of charity to take the money because you are, in a sense, endorsing Saudi Arabia and its treatment.
But it's a big employer in the area as well. I just think it's such a conundrum about clean money and how at which point is it okay to accept it and when is it not?
I think where we've got to in this conversation is that these judgments are really difficult. I want to be absolutely clear that those authors and people in the books industry who are supporting this fossil-free books campaign, I don't think they're bad people. And I get them, I completely understand their motives. I just think that in the end, they are not achieving what they want to achieve by humiliating Bailey Gifford and the book festivals and other arts organisations in receipt of Bailey Gifford money. I don't think they're achieving what they want to achieve and actually are probably net, with this particular campaign, doing more harm than good.
Yeah.